Picture this. You're serving your country overseas when your HOA sells your grandfather's land over $847 in unpaid dues. That's exactly what Bethany Cromwell thought she could get away with. The email hit Marcus "Tank" Rodriguez's phone like a roadside bomb while he was stationed at a forward operating base in Afghanistan. Bethany, the HOA president of Willowbrook Estates, had illegally foreclosed on his family's homestead, 2.3 acres of Texas soil that meant everything to him and his wife, Elena. Even the roar of helicopter rotors couldn't drown out the sound of his world collapsing, as he realized that while he bled for freedom abroad, a suburban tyrant was stealing his inheritance for the price of a used car. Bethany assumed distance meant powerlessness, that deployment equaled abandonment. But she was about to learn that some soldiers never stop fighting, and Tank Rodriguez came from 3 generations of Texans who had always defended their land. At 34, Staff Sergeant Tank Rodriguez wasn't just any soldier. A 3rd-generation military man and a diesel mechanic, he'd inherited more than just his grandfather's land, he'd inherited a legacy. That land, 2.3 acres in Willowbrook Estates with a 1940s farmhouse, a red barn converted into a workshop, and a pond reflecting the endless Texas sky, was more than property. It was home. It was where the porch swing still creaked with memories of his proposal to Elena, where the scent of mesquite wood from his grandfather's outdoor kitchen seemed to linger in every text Elena sent during his deployment. Tank and Elena dreamed of renovating the farmhouse, starting a family, and growing his repair business in the barn, dreams bigger than Texas itself. Elena, an elementary school teacher, was holding down the fort and counting the days until his return. But every paradise has its snake, and Willowbrook's was Bethany Cromwell. At 52, Bethany had turned petty authority into an art form. She drove a gleaming white BMW X5, lived in the biggest house on the block, and was married to City Councilman Harold Cromwell. Real estate was her game, control her addiction, and military families her favorite targets. 3 months into Tank's deployment, she launched her attack, laughable but malicious violation notices. An unapproved red barn, despite being painted red since 1940. Excessive native prairie grass, planted specifically for wildlife. Non-conforming features on a farmhouse that had weathered more storms than Bethany had seen hot dinners. Elena worked overtime to pay mounting fines, while Tank dodged IEDs halfway around the world. When the violations escalated to $200 per day penalties, Elena reached out to other military families and discovered a disturbing pattern. Bethany routinely targeted deployed soldiers. Strangers began circling their property, measuring, photographing, documenting, like vultures. Elena's voice, during nightly video calls, began to tremble in ways Tank had never heard. Then came Bethany's masterstroke, a trumped-up $847 special assessment for community beautification. When Elena couldn't produce paperwork that had never been sent, Bethany moved to foreclose, fast. Over a crackling video call, Elena sobbed as strangers walked through their home, their future, their dreams. Tank clenched his jaw, watching his wife's heartbreak 8,000 miles away. Bethany's mistake was assuming his oath to fight only applied to foreign enemies. Some battles follow you home, and Tank Rodriguez had never lost a fight that mattered. The HOA's private war against one soldier was about to become very public. Rebecca Martinez's investigative report went viral, with #JusticeForTank trending across Texas. Veterans organizations pledged their support, and military families began sharing their own HOA horror stories. From Afghanistan, Tank studied Texas property law in his off-duty hours with the focus of a man planning a military operation, and he discovered a bombshell. Willowbrook Estates had been built on land where the mineral rights were never properly transferred to the developers. This wasn't just interesting, it was dynamite. Tank called his grandfather's old lawyer, the sharp-eyed Mr. Pettigrew, now 78 but still deadly with a contract. "Mr. Pettigrew," Tank said, his voice calm but heavy, "it's time to dust off some old files and call in a few favors." Meanwhile, Elena had transformed their home into Command Central, founding the Willowbrook Veterans Alliance, 18 military families who'd also been targeted by Bethany's schemes. The sound of her overworked printer filled the house as she documented every illegal action, every forged signature, every violation of federal law, building a case that would soon bury Bethany in her own corruption. Bethany grew desperate, filing a lawsuit to seize the property under eminent domain, claiming environmental hazards from old farming chemicals. But her legal maneuvers were increasingly frantic. The FBI kept asking questions, Harold's gambling debts hit the papers, and even her high-powered Dallas lawyers began avoiding her calls. Tank sent Elena a final message before his return, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of a man who had found his enemy's weakness. "Baby, she thinks she's fighting a deployed soldier. But I'm coming home soon, and I'm bringing the full weight of the United States military with me. Tell Pettigrew to have those files ready. Bethany's about to learn what happens when you steal from the wrong family." Bethany panicked. She convinced Harold to ram through an emergency city ordinance, passed at 2 a.m. in an empty chamber, giving the city power to seize any military family's home under the guise of community safety. But Elena was watching, and what she found next made her stomach drop. Bethany had forged Tank's signature on HOA documents, claiming he had voluntarily agreed to foreclosure. The forgery was laughable. Tank's real signature, honed by thousands of military forms, was nothing like the childish scrawl she'd submitted. Elena's hands shook as she photographed the evidence, realizing this was no longer just HOA abuse, this was federal mail fraud. Tank's JAG team filed charges immediately, and the FBI expanded their investigation into Cromwell Holdings LLC, uncovering a web of financial crimes across 3 states. From Jerry's research, Elena learned about quiet title actions, a legal process to clear disputes over property ownership. If you prove someone fraudulently claimed your land, you not only reclaim it, but you can also collect damages. Pro tip: always store your original property deeds in a safe deposit box, not at home, to protect against convenient break-ins or fires. The Willowbrook Veterans Alliance became a force of nature. Neighbors who once feared speaking up now gathered at Elena's kitchen table, building their case together. The smell of fresh coffee and determination filled the air as military families shared their stories and documented every detail. Rebecca's story gained national attention, advocacy groups rallied, and #JusticeForTank began trending nationwide. Bethany's little kingdom was under a microscope now, exposing all the ugliness hidden behind those manicured lawns. Bethany's nuclear option, claiming Tank's land contained hazardous chemicals and must be seized, backfired too. Her consultants found only trace amounts of legal, decades-old pesticides. Meanwhile, the FBI kept circling, Harold's gambling debts became public, and her lawyers abandoned her like rats from a sinking ship. From his dusty tent in Afghanistan, Tank spent long nights on the phone with Mr. Pettigrew, who unearthed a stunning secret in the 1987 property records. His grandfather had never sold the mineral rights to the developers. In Texas, mineral rights are separate from surface rights, and Tank now owned the dominant estate beneath all of Willowbrook Estates. Oil, gas, and water rights under every home, every street, and every lawn still belonged to the Rodriguez family. Elena's hands trembled as she read the original deed, the smell of vintage paper filling Pettigrew's office. Harold and Bethany's scheme had been about buying up homes to resell those rights to energy companies, rights Tank already owned. Even more damning, city geological surveys revealed significant natural gas deposits under the subdivision. Harold had secretly courted a $50 million deal with an energy company, unaware the mineral rights weren't his to sell. Mr. Pettigrew summed it up perfectly. "Your grandfather was the smartest man I ever knew, Marcus. He left you the leverage to crush anyone who thought money made them untouchable." Tank's voice during his next call carried a new confidence, the confidence of a man who owned everything his enemy wanted. "Baby, start documenting every single thing they've done to us and our neighbors. We're not just getting our land back. We're about to own this entire situation." Bethany thought she was stealing from a deployed soldier, but she was stealing from the man who controls whether her subdivision can even exist. Operation Homestead was born. Elena's kitchen table became their war room, where coffee stains mingled with legal documents. Tank, Elena, Jerry, Mr. Pettigrew, and the JAG lawyers formed an unlikely but unstoppable team. and the smell of victory began to overpower the lingering stench of Bethany's corruption. Bethany's empire was crumbling, piece by piece. Jerry explained to Elena what few homeowners realize. In Texas, mineral rights are the dominant estate. Whoever owns what's underground controls what happens on the surface. That meant Tank wasn't just a homeowner, he was the unofficial king of Willowbrook Estates. Meanwhile, Elena's intelligence gathering would have impressed CIA analysts. She secretly photographed board meetings, documented Bethany's suspicious luxury purchases, a new BMW, sparkling diamond jewelry bought with stolen money, and tracked Harold's casino trips with the patience of a private investigator. Jerry mobilized his military network like calling in an airstrike, bringing in retired JAG officers, veteran-owned businesses, and military legal aid groups who formed a legal strike team, communicating through encrypted apps and planning their moves like a covert mission. Mr. Pettigrew taught them about adverse possession, how HOAs can lose their authority through their own procedural incompetence. He reminded everyone, keep meticulous records of every HOA mistake. Their errors become your ammunition in court. Elena's evidence pile grew into a mountain, forged signatures that looked like a kindergartner's scribbles, illegal foreclosures in violation of federal law, mail fraud for failing to notify Tank properly, Harold's blatant conflict of interest as both city councilman and HOA beneficiary, and the secret meetings with energy companies to steal mineral rights. Rebecca Martinez's reporting turned Tank's fight into a national symbol of military families standing up to corruption. National Veterans Podcasts and Military Family Today magazine ran features. A media avalanche was forming, ready to bury Bethany. Even Tank's commanding officer authorized military legal deployment, treating his case as a potential precedent for protecting service member property rights nationwide. Tank dug deeper, learning about municipal bond fraud. When cities inflate property values and collect taxes fraudulently, sometimes abetted by HOA foreclosures. If proven, it would add federal charges to the growing stack of crimes piling up like autumn leaves in a Texas windstorm. Elena's dining table became ground zero for the rebellion, covered in legal papers, coffee rings, and the determination of a woman who refused to back down. Martha Washington ran the military spouses network like a campaign manager, while retired Colonel Hayes prepared to testify, bringing the gravitas of a lifetime in uniform. Local VFW and American Legion chapters joined the cause, transforming fearful individuals into a united front. Tank coordinated the strategy with military precision. In the Army, we call this mission planning. Same rules apply: know your enemy, secure your resources, coordinate your attack, and strike with overwhelming force. They timed everything perfectly, waiting for Tank's return to unveil their full evidence at just the right moment. Meanwhile, Bethany continued spiraling, filing fraudulent documents, bribing inspectors, even threatening Elena in public, where witnesses now quietly recorded her every word. Her guilt was obvious, her fear stronger than her expensive perfume, and even her own lawyers began to retreat. Jerry's garage became a war room out of a spy movie. Maps of the neighborhood, financial charts of the Cromwell family's corruption, and radios connecting them to military legal teams nationwide. Tank prepared psychologically as well, identifying Bethany's weaknesses, rehearsing the confrontation he knew was coming. When the FBI requested Cromwell Holdings' financial records, Bethany panicked. She claimed a computer virus had corrupted all HOA records from 2019 to 2023, but neighbors saw smoke rising from her office window as she burned papers in a trash can. Martha Washington, walking her dog, noted dryly, "Funny, computer viruses usually don't require matches and lighter fluid." Then Elena posted a photo of Tank in uniform on social media, captioned, "Coming home to reclaim what's ours." Within hours, #WelcomeHomeTank trended nationwide as military families and advocacy groups shared it thousands of times. Bethany's panic became visible from space. Her voice rose to dog whistle frequencies as she made desperate phone calls, trying to fast-track demolition of Tank's barn by bribing city crews with double pay. But even the crews started questioning why they were rushing to destroy an 80-year-old structure. Then Elena revealed her ace in the hole, She'd recorded all her phone calls with Bethany under Texas one-party consent law. Those recordings caught Bethany admitting to fraud, backdating notices, and openly mocking military families as temporary residents who don't deserve permanent rights. Jerry organized a welcome home tank celebration in the HOA's own common area, the same place where Bethany had bullied homeowners for years. Over 200 people RSVP'd in 48 hours, turning her kingdom into enemy territory. Bethany tried to buy silence with a $500,000 settlement offer and a non-disclosure agreement. But through his JAG lawyers, Tank sent back one devastating line. Mrs. Cromwell can keep her blood money. We want justice, transparency, and her permanent resignation from any authority over military families. Her offer only confirmed how deep her crimes ran. Tank learned from military intelligence officers how to detect surveillance, preserve evidence, and trace document tampering, treating the HOA's corruption like an enemy operation. Elena began documenting how Bethany's pattern of fraud qualified as racketeering, potentially triggering federal RICO charges. The smell of justice was growing stronger than the coffee that fueled their late-night sessions. National media took notice when Good Morning America requested an interview with Tank, making his return a symbol of veterans fighting back against domestic corruption. Bethany's final desperate ploys backfired one after another. She filed false police reports against Elena, but the responding officers, themselves veterans, quickly realized who the real aggressor was. Even Harold tried one last gambit, secretly offering Tank $2 million via Cayman Islands shell companies for his mineral rights. But the offer, riddled with typos and coffee stains, was laughable. Tank's response, delivered through Pettigrew, was surgical. Tell Mr. Cromwell my mineral rights aren't for sale at any price. But his freedom might be negotiable. Elena delivered her own devastating blow at a live-streamed city council meeting, playing Bethany's recorded threats aloud while the chamber was packed with uniformed veterans and military families. Bethany didn't yet realize she'd walked into a perfectly laid trap, but she was about to find out that her reign of terror was over. Elena's voice was steady as steel as she played the audio recordings, Bethany admitting to forging documents, discriminating against military families, and bragging she could remove undesirables at will. The sweet taste of justice was on her tongue as she watched city council members squirm, realizing they'd been enabling a scandal that was about to detonate. Tank, meanwhile, coordinated with military police investigators who specialized in civilian fraud. They agreed to attend his homecoming, honored guests, but really, experts in corruption and financial crimes. The military doesn't abandon its own. Tank's case had become a test. Would civilian authorities protect a soldier's rights, or would military justice need to step in? The sound of combat boots on courthouse floors was replacing Bethany's frantic heels, but these boots belonged to people sworn to defend against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Tank also learned about CATAM lawsuits, where private citizens sue on the government's behalf over fraud against public funds, and collect a share of what's recovered. That meant he could expose Harold's misuse of city resources to pay gambling debts, not only delivering justice but funding legal aid for other military families. Over 400 people RSVP'd to Tank's homecoming. Local businesses donated food, banners, sound equipment. Veterans drove in from across Texas. Barbecue smoke and yellow ribbons transformed Bethany's pristine subdivision into a celebration of service and solidarity. On his final call home, Elena wept tears that tasted like victory. Her husband wasn't returning as a victim, but as a conquering hero. Bethany's unraveling was plain to see. 3 a.m. phone calls filled with wild threats, all calmly recorded by Elena. FBI warrants dropped on Cromwell Holdings and City Hall. Harold's gambling debts splashed across the front page. And then, on a crisp Saturday morning, the community center buzzed with anticipation. More than 500 people packed in, news crews from Houston, Dallas, and San Antonio setting up cameras. The air smelled of barbecue, justice, and the faint perfume of a reckoning. The doors opened. Staff Sergeant Rodriguez arrived in full dress uniform, flanked by Colonel Hayes, a JAG legal team, and 2 Humvees carrying enough documentation to bury Bethany's empire under federal charges. The applause shook the walls. Veterans saluted. Children waved flags. Neighbors who'd once cowered now cheered as Tank walked through the crowd, Elena at his side. And then Bethany struck her last stand. She shoved through the crowd, dragging her expensive lawyer and private security, waving papers and shrieking about trespassing and foreclosed property. But her voice cracked like cheap glass as Tank calmly stepped to the podium. "Thank you all for this welcome home," he began, his words carrying the weight of a soldier who'd served honorably and come home to find thieves in his backyard. "I'd like to share a few things about Mrs. Cromwell's activities you'll find enlightening." The revelations came like artillery fire. Elena played Bethany's recorded confessions. Mr. Pettigrew unveiled the original 1987 deed proving Tank owned the mineral rights under the entire subdivision. Jerry displayed photos of Harold's secret meetings with energy executives. The JAG team read out the federal charges. Bethany's meltdown was spectacular, screaming that Tank was unstable, foam at the corners of her mouth, her expensive suit soaked with fear. But Tank's reply cut through the noise. "Mrs. Cromwell, this is my community, built on my family's land. I own the mineral rights under your house, your streets, every blade of grass. You've been trying to steal my inheritance and sell drilling rights for $50 million, but the joke's on you. You can't sell what you don't own." The crowd erupted, applause, cheers, gasps, as FBI agents stepped forward, cuffs in hand. Bethany and Harold were led away, mascara running, heels clicking like a death march. Rebecca Martinez live-streamed the arrests. Within minutes, social media exploded. Military families across the nation celebrated. Justice, at last. Tank took the podium one last time. This was never about revenge. This was about protecting military families from predators. And ensuring it never happens again. The final twist? Tank donated the mineral rights revenue to establish the Operation Homestead Foundation, offering free legal aid to military families fighting HOA abuse. In its first year, the foundation helped 47 families recover homes and expose corruption nationwide. Bethany got 5 years in federal prison for mail fraud, forgery, and discrimination. Harold got 7 years for corruption and racketeering. Together, they were ordered to repay over $3 million to the families they defrauded. Their luxury cars were auctioned. Their power was gone. Their names became cautionary tales. Tank and Elena restored his grandfather's farmhouse, turning the Red Barn into a workshop where neighborhood kids learned mechanics and woodworking. Elena grew a victory garden where security guards had once parked. The air smelled of sawdust, motor oil, and healing. Willowbrook elected a new HOA board, veterans and military spouses, who eliminated punitive fines, planted a memorial garden, and turned the HOA from a petty dictatorship into a real community. A year later, they held the first Homestead Festival, raising money for military families while neighbors laughed, ate barbecue, and remembered how they stood up to bullies, together. Tank's case even changed federal law. The Rodriguez Amendment passed, strengthening protections for deployed service members and holding HOAs accountable nationwide. Sitting on his grandfather's porch swing, Tank looked at Elena, the sunset painting the Texas sky, and said, "Looks like Operation Homestead is going nationwide." And his final wisdom, spoken to the crowd that day, and to all of us, still echoes. Sometimes the biggest bullies are just scared people who never learn the difference between power and strength. Real strength protects others. It doesn't prey on them. Pushpin if you've got an HOA horror story, drop it in the comments. Tank reads everyone. Subscribe for more real stories of neighbors standing up to HOA Karens and watching karma knock at the door. Next week, the city tried to demolish a veteran's food truck, so he bought the entire downtown block. Fire, thanks for watching HOA Stories, where justice is always served.